Modern philosophy is a fucking joke, and more importantly, from my perspective, philosophy content on social media is growing rapidly recently and in the wrong direction. If you've been recommended this video and my content, then you probably know people like Jet Franson, Alex O'Connor, Jordan Peterson. And this video isn't about them in particular, but these kinds of figures have blown up recently on social media, and they are actually highlighting very clearly what the obvious problem with modern philosophy actually is. I'm just going to be really clear and really concise. Philosophy is useless, but it also doesn't have to be, which is the really frustrating thing. It's similar to mathematics in a sense. You see, mathematics in academia is also fucking useless, even though it's very powerful. It's probably the most powerful high leverage tool that we've ever developed as a species. And philosophy is really similar, but there's a key difference, because at least with mathematics, you can see it leave academia. So there's a whole field called applied mathematics, where you can see mathematical knowledge and insights actually coming into contact with real systems, and they usually revolutionize those systems. But we don't get that kind of thing with philosophy. Philosophy is kind of like all the problems with academia and mathematics, but on steroids. You can make a really smart sounding quote or statement, but it's all confined and has no real purpose to anything you or me actually will ever do. It's also really performative. Like, you can fool yourself into thinking that something is actually helping you in some way. Like, you read a Nietzsche book and you look all smart and you're like, oh yeah, this is an interesting idea. Reading something and it being an interesting idea is not the same. Ask yourself, when you read a Nietzsche book, when you hear some quote about a philosopher from 1,000 years ago, how has that actually, tell me concretely, how has that actually changed your life in any meaningful way? Modern philosophy has essentially turned into, I'm going to tell you this quote by this guy from 1,000 years ago. You're going to sit there and stroke your chin and pretend to ponder it. And then neither of us are actually going to do anything with that information, but at least we sounded smart and validated ourselves. The problem with this is that there's a clear misunderstanding here. Learning philosophy and doing philosophy are fundamentally different things. Again, we see a similar kind of issue in mathematics. Just the fact that something is Euclid's algorithm or Pythagoras' theorem is already an issue, but fine, at least you can say, yeah, but that's just a naming convention. It just makes it easier. It's hundreds of years of convention. Like, there's no point in changing it. Fair enough. But again, we see this on steroids in philosophy, because the entire subject turns into one whole massive circle jerk of who said what and when. And by the way, there's a misconception that people actually also have that philosophers don't exist anymore. For example, even if you know that not to be true, subconsciously you still think it to be the case. If I say the word philosopher to you, if you close your eyes and I say, imagine a philosopher, what do you picture in your mind? It's not a modern academic. It is some Greek guy, like at the market, like doing this kind of pose or something. And actually that precisely highlights my point. The reason you imagine the guy from 1,000 years ago instead of something from today is because modern philosophy in academia, on social media, wherever it may be, is useless. I've spoken a bit about the polymath model of learning on this channel before, but to summarize, the reason that we remember figures like Plato and Aristotle and these people for thousands of years after they died is because they had a real impact on the things they were talking about. And how do you have a real impact on something? Well, you actually have to come into contact with reality. That's why in the polymath model, these people that are philosophers, right, they're not physicians and architects and military tacticians despite being philosophers. It is precisely because they do all of those things, because they actually come into contact with reality and they apply their thinking, that they can do philosophy very well. That's when philosophy and something like mathematics is at its most effective, when you can say, I can learn something deeply and understand something deeply at a meta level and prove that by applying it to some separate domain. You see, all of these labels are just modern inventions at the end of the day. The philosophers you had in mind when you think about the word philosopher weren't really philosophers. Like, they didn't call themselves that. They did a bit of mathematics, a bit of medicine, a bit of whatever the hell they were interested in, but music or whatever it may be. They actually applied their ideas into multiple domains. And the thing you need to understand about doing that is that you gain more intuition and context and ability to think deeply anyway. It's kind of ironic that you can't train the muscle of metacognition and thinking deeply by just sitting in a room and thinking deeply. You gain real and useful insights by actual exposure and contact with real systems. Because the thing is, most disciplines are extremely complicated, right? So you don't know what dots can be connected. For example, if you learn how to swim better, perhaps you'll discover some kind of new physics about the universe. That's the point. You don't know where these dots are going to be connected from. And of course, in response to that, I'm going to hear the classic, yeah, but polymaths can't exist anymore because all the fields that we do today in like universities, for example, so physics or mathematics or even something like music or history, these things are just too big now for someone to independently learn all of them. And I've made a full video about that. I'm not going to go into that all again. I'll link it somewhere if you want to watch why that's a stupid way of thinking. To summarize, basically, it's that you're never going to learn all of these things anyway. Even if you did really just dedicate yourself to only ever learning mathematics, you will never learn all of mathematics. So that was never the goal anyway. So that was never a constraint either. But like I said, if you want my full analysis and breakdown as to why that's the case, I'll link it wherever it is, whichever corner. Okay, and if you want to learn more about how to think like an actual philosopher and start using some of those ideas in real life, first link in the description is a newsletter to a full course I have developed for precisely that purpose, where I've extracted some of the meta skills I've learned from studying formal mathematics, as well as some of my knowledge on psychology, cognition, etc., all in one space. Anyone that uses that link in the description will get 50% off the full course on launch. Although I should mention that spaces for that discount in the newsletter are almost full, and the course will be launched within a couple days of the upload of this video. To keep seeing more analysis like this, make sure to subscribe to be informed when I upload. Like this video so that more people can hear this message, and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a nice day.